We were talking earlier about Carol and Curd and sports psychology and that, and I was just curious about your own path there the last few years because you had a brilliant 2018, then 2019 you were flying, obviously came back hurler of the year in 2020 last year, but the Kilkenny All Ireland semi final in 2019 didn't go your team's way, probably personally didn't go your way as well. So I'm just wondering, back to the sports psychology, did you have much self reflection? Did you feel you needed to do anything or just get back to basics? What was that like for you?
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, no, I didn't change. I didn't change too much, in all honesty, in terms of the training I was doing or anything like that. I was listening to a really good podcast there recently about Stephen Gerrard and his kind of career, and he mentioned something that has stuck with me since, and he said that he talked about how a massive failure can actually be the catalyst for a period of success or another massive achievement or whatever it is. And it's funny, like, you can kind of sink or swim after a defeat like that in 2019. As a team, obviously it was devastating, and you're right, on a personal level things didn't go my way that way, and it was probably it definitely wasn't a successful day in a personal sense. But as I said, you can kind of sink or swim after that. You can go back to the drawing board and say, look, we're not good enough, and I couldn't really be bothered putting into work. Or you can go back and grit your teeth and get on with it, and hopefully come back with a vengeance. And I think we did that in 2020. I suppose the challenge for us this year then is to try to see if we can replicate that after the year we had in 2020. But no, I didn't change too much. I suppose you kind of have to stick with the process. I know that's kind of a saying that kind of gets a small bit of stick because it's such a general thing. But if you do stick with what you're doing and trust that you are being coached and led in the right direction, and trust that the work you're doing will get you to where you want it. It can be a powerful thing to keep doing that over and over again, and it's nearly more satisfying then that after a failure like that, even though I was doing kind of the same thing, that you come back the following year, or even doing the same things, obviously changing a small few bits and pieces here and there, and to have obviously what happened last year is immensely enjoyable and satisfactory.
And if you were to sort of track the biggest changes that have happened under John Kiely since he came in before the 2017 season, what would you say are the most dramatic changes that have been made to take you where you are?
I think John is an extremely intelligent man. He's obviously a principal of the Abbey School in Tipperary, and I think he's smart enough that he has surrounded himself with an unbelievable team of coaches around him. In fairness, they've all been well talked about, and they're all brilliant in their own way. But I do believe that we're incredibly lucky. We're incredibly lucky as a group of players to have such exposure to such a high level coaching team. The likes of they've all, you've heard of them all at this stage. But like we're not left wanting for anything. In terms of feedback, whether that be on your individual performance or on the team performance or coaching. You can always look for feedback of any of the coaches. It's not just Paul. Paul has a very good group of coaches with him as well. So I just think that we are lucky to be involved in such a high performance, high profile setup. It's kind of funny. I was again on another podcast, Rio Ferdinand. He was talking about when he left United and went to QPR, and how he was so shocked about how they trained day to day, and the stuff they were talking about in the dressing room, and how they just acted and how they performed as professionals. How he was so used to playing with United for 10, 15 years and their ways and the way they went about things, and then he left and went to QPR, and he thought he'd be kind of getting the same exposure, but he wasn't. Obviously, he wasn't anywhere near the professional setup that United was. And I just kind of struck me again that we are lucky to be involved in such a high profile or such a high performance setup. And as I said, that's kind of lucky on our part.
And just a final one then from me. I think when teams start winning All Irelands, as you've had, I suppose part of the motivation then is to leave a legacy, that type of stuff. I don't think Limerick have done back to back in their history. So is there a talk of doing legacy to some degree, or that's probably not something that you're going to say publicly anyway?
Oh, honestly, we haven't talked about anything like that at all. I suppose at the end of the day, like you have to remember that. Like I'm 26, and as I said, I'm nearly one of the older panel members on the team, and like we've so many young fellas. We've two 18-year-olds sitting there leaving cert. Do you think they're talking about legacy? They're not. There's nobody talking about legacy in our camp. We just, as I said, I just honestly believe that if you have a mindset of trying to be the best you can be and trying to get the most out of yourself, but then see where that takes. So you can talk about legacy in 10-15 years time. You're sitting at the bar having a pint of Guinness, talking to other outlets around the pub. There'll be plenty of time to talk about that in time, but as you can imagine, we have two 18-year-olds sitting in the leaving cert at the moment, so you can imagine that there most certainly isn't any legacy talk out of our camp, so leave that to other people. They can talk about what they want. That's something that we maybe can talk about when we're retired and down the line. So we'll see where that gets us.
Cheers, Grog. Join the Our Game Supporters Club at Patreon for €5 per month to get audio podcasts of the Hurling and Football Show and much more exclusive material.